We'll begin Concurrent Session 3.1 titled New Faces of War. This session will be moderated by Mr. Timothy Martin, the Courier Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal. Mr. Martin, the floor is yours.
All right, well, good afternoon. We have a very interesting panel here about the new faces of war and a great panel of experts up here. And the topic of the panel, New Faces of War, it struck me as very unusual and interesting in that, we've been reporting and observing these military conflicts around the world where, yes, there are new elements, but there are also these reminders of the old faces of war, of these protracted, really ground combats we're seeing in the Middle East, in Europe, and elsewhere. And so we're seeing a bit of collision of these worlds, and I'm based here in Seoul, and I think a little bit about the North Korean soldiers that have been dispatched to Russia. And when they were there in the first weeks, we kept hearing they were doing fairly old school tasks like digging trenches. And then as soon as they saw combat, we saw here perhaps the new face of war. They were attacked by drones. So we see this new and old dynamic in military conflicts around the world. And the known tactics have been discussed and practiced for decades, but today we'll be discussing what's new, or what's making a major comeback. And with that, I would like to briefly introduce our panelists as people come in for the session. On my immediate left is Oded Ailam. He's a member of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs Research Institute. He served for 24 years in Mossad, where he held key positions, including head of the Counterterrorism Center. Next up is Dr. Richard Falkenrath. He's a senior fellow at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University, and he served at the National Security Council and White House, ultimately as deputy assistant to the president. Next to him is Dr. Shin Beomchul. He's senior research fellow at the Sejong Institute, and former vice minister of national defense for South Korea. I believe the plan is, Dr. Shin, you will speak in Korean in your remarks? Yes, so when Dr. Shin is speaking, he'll be third up. You might want to reach for the translation, for the translator if you do not speak Korean. To his left is President Tokuchi Hideshi, president of the Research Institute for Peace and Security in Japan. He was also on my panel last year, so nice to see you again, as was Dr. Shin. He served as Vice Minister of Defense for International Affairs from 2014 to 2015. And then on the far left, or your far right, the audience's far right, is Professor Wang Junsheng. He's professor and director of the Department of China's Regional Strategy, National Institute of International Strategy at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. He focuses a lot on China and the two Koreas. So if I could launch into questions here, again, the panel is about the new faces of war. A very basic question, we'll sort of go from my left in order here. I guess to what extent are we seeing new faces of war? I wonder if you have a yes or no answer to that question, and then if you could perhaps elaborate, why do you feel that way?
The answer is yes. Thank you. No. First of all, I want to thank the Asan for inviting me and have the privilege of being here with this extinguished panel, and it's a real privilege to be here. I served 24 years in the Mossad, and if I can give you one advice, don't use beepers. I think it's a little bit problematic. I would start with what happened to Israel on the 7th of October. And what happened to Israel on the 7th of October 23, Israel experienced the most devastating, I would say, attack in modern history relating to Israel. In few hours, Hamas had launched an extensive attack on Israel in capturing and killing about 1,200 people in few hours, occupying military bases and villages and so on. And what was shocking was the total collapse of the Israeli intelligence and the defense system. It's something no one in Israel had perceived and predicted, and then it happened within hours. And think about it. The Hamas was using drones that were purchased on eBay and AliExpress with 50 years old Russian grenade in order to blind completely all the Israeli intelligence posts by dropping those explosives and on communication towers, on observation masts. And in few hours, they actually blinded completely the IDF. This was a total shock to the Israeli defense. But you know, as General Patton said, success is how much high you bounce after hitting the bottom. And what happens afterwards was not merely a retaliation by Israel, it was a complete transformation in response to the most significant security failure in decades. And Israel actually launched a campaign that I call it the first truly digital war. And when I mean digital war, I don't mean robots fighting against robots or engagement in cyber warfare. I'm talking about a digital war. It's an integrated, real-time, AI-enabled military campaign that use the system in such a seemingly way that it was more than a technological shift. It was rather completely new doctrine that's going to shape the whole phase of the future war in the 21st century. Now, we are talking all morning here about the nuclear threat, but let's not forget the dominant threat still exists is the conventional war. And what happened on last year in Israel is a complete change. And in the heart of that, in the heart of this change, is of this what I call digital war, is the rapid closure of intelligence on one hand and action loop. If we can take previous wars, I'm not talking about Napoleon time, I'm even talking about US campaigns in Iraq and in Syria and Afghanistan, the amount of time and the friction that was needed in order to provide the intelligence into the actual combating forces was sometimes days, sometimes hours, and we are talking here about less than 50 seconds. Less than 50 seconds. And this is something that we have never seen before in modern wars, and it shapes completely a new doctrine of how we fight those modern wars. Now, the way that it has been conducted is a loop that works in practice this way. There is the collection of data. The collection of data comes from drones, for Hermes drone, or from Huron drones, or whatever. Data coming from satellites, data coming from SIGINT intercept, and of course, ground sensors, and the last and the most important is the soldier on the ground who provides the real-time basis and the real data. All of that is integrated into one system. It's an AI platform. The name of the platform is called Torch X or Carmel. And this platform, actually, what it uses, it's using AI in order to diffuse all the data that is accumulated from all different sources on a real time, within seconds, and in order to get vision detection, facial recognition, behavior prediction. Everything is condensed into one system that is doing that within seconds. Now, the second thing is the dissemination of this information. Once the threat is verified, say, let's see, an armed man entering a civilian place like hospital or UNRWA office or whatever, there are civilians there that we don't want to hurt them and we want to be very precise in targeting our target. Then what we have a broadcasting system that's called a Fireweaver, that this network actually places the map, the digital map of the target to everybody who is in the arena. If we're talking about an F-35 fighter, if we're talking about a tank, if we are talking about a unit, and if we're talking, of course, of command and control. Everybody sees the same picture in real time. And I'm talking to everybody, and even the platoon commander with his tablet. The next thing is the engagement. The system auto-match who has the best possibility, who has the best angle, who can give the best shot in order to facilitate the attack on the target. It can be the fighter pilot, it can be the drone, it can be the tank commander, and it can be the sniper that is right now 80 feet away and has the best vision towards the target. And everything that I'm talking about is condensed into seconds. And in prioritization of who is going to do what. And by that, for instance, we cut the chain of command and the chain of order that was usually applied in military operation like that. And if we take a look at what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, this is one of the main faults there, the chain of command. This is in seconds. And of course, after hitting the target is the feedback. The feedback is extremely important in order to facilitate corrections, in order to facilitate the next target, and also in order to advance and to assist the forces on the ground in advancing. And I'm talking advancing in the most condensed populated area in the world. Gaza is the most condensed populated area in the world. And we are trying to eliminate as much as we can civilian casualties. This is how the system had been working in Gaza, and this system is going to be the dominant system in the next future world.
All right, well, thank you. As you say, the first digital war, there's a lot of Terminator-type stuff you described, and stuff happening just within seconds. Dr. Falkenrath, if I could next turn to you, what are your thoughts on, are you seeing new faces of war?
Yes, I am, and I think we all are in real time, and this is an excellent description of one aspect of it. But I'd like to make sort of 3 points about this new phase of war. First, about the technology that's happening. So this is the Israeli experience in Gaza is a terrific illustration, but it's not the only one. This isn't the time to catalog all the different breakthroughs that are happening in technology and their military implications, but it is worth noting that a defining feature of the breakthroughs today, unlike, say, 40 years ago or even 100 years ago, is that they are so widely available. And so when you think about the ability to artificial intelligence, reconnaissance, overhead imagery, precision strike, all these things are now, the technologies are becoming very widely available. This is, the sorts of big platforms that the United States and other great powers have had are not what is necessary anymore for many types of conflict. And so the implication of this, I think, are several, and they're actually rather worrisome for the predominant power of the day. So one is the dominant power, I think, needs to be prepared to be humbled by this. And the big capabilities of the past that we were able to depend upon might not be able to carry the day in the next conflict. The edge of these legacy systems is essentially being eroded, and the digital dependencies of the system, and I'm talking from the United States perspective, do create a vulnerability. vulnerability that is especially acute when you have to project power over great distances, which is the case for the United States, certainly in Asia. And so I think the technological changes, they're breathtaking, and they're extraordinary, but they're not necessarily beneficial to the dominant power at the day, and that's something we have to deal with. Nuclear weapons were another breathtaking innovation in technology, but they were exclusively held by the state. And in this case, they're not. They're not exclusively held by the state. They're very widely distributed. The second point I'd like to make about the new phase of warfare, what we're dealing with today, has to do with time. And so the thing about war today is they're long. They go on for a long time. They're not quick. And our military planning and our strategists would like to have quick wars that have definable, achievable political objectives. And there are a few such in history. They are held up as the paradigms of military success, the Six-Day War in Israel, Desert Storm for the United States, but those are the exceptions. So by and large today, wars go on for a long time. I mean, even this war in Israel is now in its 18th month or 17th month. Look at like Vietnam went on for a long time. Iraq went on for a long time. Afghanistan went on for a long time. Wars go on for a long time. And so there's this mismatch between a military planning apparatus that goes for the quick, decisive victory and the reality that these things drag out for a very long time. And I think we've learned from the Ukraine conflict is that at least our economies are not well suited to sustain conflict for months and years on end. Israel, I think, is a different case because it's fighting for survival. But for the United States, where wars are sort of discretionary or often, the economy is just not built to do this forever and for really long periods of time. And then the third thing that I think is changing today, and this is not about technology and it's not about time, it's about trust. And when you think of how for 80 years the United States has been preparing to both prevent war and then fight it, it has mostly been done with allies or coalition partners. There are a few exceptions of something that's purely unilateral, but by and large, the United States operates with allies. And when it's projecting power over a long distance, it needs bases, it needs airspace, it needs ports to come into, and the military systems are highly integrated. And what we've seen lately is a depletion in the trust that exists in the international system, and that's coming from American domestic politics. And that's very worrisome because it is one of the bedrock foundations for decades of how the United States prepares for war, deters war, and fights it. And if you can't trust your allies to be there when they say they are, if you can't trust the systems to be available, the ports to be open, it changes many things simultaneously. And so that's really how I'll conclude, which is to say this distinction between war and peace is really very blurry these days. I mean, there are hard wars, there are shooting wars that go on, but today mostly what we've got is something in a continuum of violence that is sort of economic conflict or political conflict about the weaponization of interdependence. And so it's very hard to say definitively that deterrence is now degraded relative to what it is, but what I think is clear is that we're seeing a decline in positive-sum thinking and a flourishment of zero-sum thinking. And zero-sum thinking, it plays out in the economic space with tariffs and whatnot, but zero-sum thinking is really the intellectual precursor to violent conflict. You have to believe that my loss is your gain or your gain is my loss, one way or the other, to actually think that going to war is rational. And so one of the things that most worries me about this new phase of war today is the people who hold on to this view that international cooperation and a peaceful international order based on rules and laws, that seems to be today in decline. And I think in addition to the technology changes that we talked about and also the long war phenomenon that we're seeing, that decline in international trust is perhaps the most worrisome feature of the modern international environment.
All right. Well, we had a bit of a hardware discussion, a bit of a software sentiment discussion as well. Dr. Shin, I'd love your thoughts on new face of war.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, let me thank you, Asan Institute, for having me at this wonderful forum. As an alumni of Asan Institute, I'm so proud of whenever I participate in this Asan Plenum. By the way, since the most of the audiences are Korean, so I will speak in Korean, enjoying the privilege as a home ground. Okay. 앞에서 좋은 말씀을 다 해주셔서 사실은 중복되는 부분이 많을 거라고 생각합니다. 그렇지만 뭐 새로운 전쟁 양상과 관련해서는 우리가 빼놓을 수 없는 것이 결국 과학기술의 발전에 따라서 군도 변하고 있다는 거죠. 사실은 이것이 새로운 건 아니라고 봅니다. 우리 전쟁의 역사를 되새겨본다고 하면은 사실 산업혁명 이후에 새로운 무기체계의 발전, 그것으로 인한 전쟁의 범위의 확대, 그 결과로서의 세계대전까지 목격을 했고 핵무기까지 개발됐습니다. 그렇지만 또 핵무기가 개발된 이후에 강대국 간의 전략경쟁이 이루어지는 그러한 상황에서 보이지 않는 틈새에서 계속적으로 분쟁이 이루어지고 있고 그런 분쟁의 과정에서 전쟁과 관련된 기술들은 끊임없이 개발되어 왔다. 그리고 지금 우리가 목격하고 있는 우크라이나나 가자지구나 이런 데서 목격하고 있는 정말로 드론 전쟁이라든가 하는 부분이 새로운 전쟁 양상을 결정짓고 있다고 생각합니다. 그렇기 때문에 사실 새로운 전쟁 양상을 이야기할 때 과학기술의 진보 이것을 빼놓을 수가 없는 것이고 뭐 지금 많이 앞에서도 언급하셨지만 AI라든가 자율 또는 반자율 무기체계의 활용 이런 부분이 어떻게 전장에서 적용될 것인가를 모든 국가들이 다 관심을 두고 추구하고 있다고 봅니다. 사실은 뭐 흔히 AI 과학기술 강군 이렇게 이야기를 하지만 군에서 AI를 다루는 사람은 많지 않아요. 그렇기 때문에 지금 각국이 모두 군사혁신, 나름대로의 군사혁신을 추구하면서 과학기술을 군에 접목시키려고 하지만 그 진전은 국가가 가진 과학기술 그리고 그 군이 가진 기술 역량에 따라서 차이가 날 거라고 생각합니다. 우리 대한민국도 사실은 과학기술 강군을 만들기 위해서 많은 노력을 하고 있지만 이것이 실전에 접목되는 데는 생각보다 많은 시간이 필요할 수밖에 없다. 왜냐? AI를 도입하려고 할 때 사실은 AI를 군에서 다뤄본 사람들은 우리 한국군에서도 손에 꼽힙니다. 이것을 어떻게 사실은 저 아래 사단급, 예하 여단이나 대대급으로 내려갈 것인가 하는 것이 실전에서 큰 고민이고 그런 부분에 있어서 다른 국가들도 마찬가지 고민을 할 거라고 생각합니다. 제가 개인적으로 판단할 때 이러한 과학기술이 국방에 전쟁에 영향을 미치는 것으로 인해서 어드밴티지를 누릴 수 있는 나라는 사실 미국과 중국이라고 생각합니다. 그러한 격차가 앞으로 더 커질 경우 이것은 뭐 핵과 같은 전략 무기뿐만 아니라 실전에서의 첨단 무기 체계에서의 격차도 상당히 커질 수밖에 없고 그것을 국가들이 따라잡아야 된다 하는 부분이죠. 두 번째는요. 공급망의 중요성이 더더욱 증가한다고 생각합니다. 앞서 제가 말씀드린 것처럼 과학기술이 군에 접목된다는 것은 한편으로는요. 비싼 무기체계가 등장하는 것이고 그 비싼 무기체계를 어느 한 국가가 독점적으로 많이 보유하는 것은 제한됩니다. 예산상으로. 그렇기 때문에 뭐 아주 재래식 포탄도 마찬가지겠지만 전쟁이 발발했을 때 어느 한 국가가 그 전쟁에 필요한 물자를 독자적으로 미리 준비하고 전장에서 사용하는 것은 제한된다. 따라서 무엇이 중요하냐? 동맹을 맺고 안 맺고도 중요하지만 사실은 동맹 못지않게 이러한 공급망, 서플라이 체인에 있어서의 협력 체계를 많이 가진 국가가 소위 말하는 전쟁 지속 능력이 강해질 수밖에 없다. 그런 부분에 있어서 모든 국가들이 앞으로 그런 부분에 더 신경을 많이 쓸 거라고 생각합니다. 세 번째로는 사실은 새로운 전쟁 양상이 어디에서 더 심화될 것이냐? 우리가 앞서도 뭐 말씀하셨지만 사이버, 우주 그리고 이런 것과 접목해서 AI의 역할이나 지휘 통제 체제가 더 큰 관심을 모을 거라고 생각합니다. 사이버 영역의 중요성은 뭐 예전부터 계속 강조되어 왔죠. 그런데 과거의 사이버 영역에서의 어떻게 보면은 뭐 전투라고 할까요? 분쟁은 어느 일방이 공격을 하면 방어하고 그 방어한 이후에 공격하고 하는 문제였다면은 지금은 방어와 공격, 공격과 방어가 동시에 전개되는 형태로 전개될 것이고 그런 부분에 있어서 실제 지휘 통제라는가 하는 부분의 중요성이 더더욱 증가될 것이다. 그리고 두 번째로 우주와 관련해서도 과거는 우주는 사실은 정찰 영역, 그러니까 감시 정찰을 하는 그런 핵심 자원으로서의 역할이 강조되지만 앞으로는 사실 많은 나라들이 우주 역량을 초강대국을 따라잡고 있기 때문에 다음의 영역에서는 우주에서의 직접적인 교전, 그러니까 상대의 위성이 작동하지 못하도록 하는 그러한 교전까지도 고려될 것이다. 그래서 이 사이버와 우주 역량을 누가 먼저 갖추느냐에 따라서 전쟁 양상에서 누가 주도권을 행사할 것인가. 그리고 그것은 이미 잘 알려진 것처럼 지휘 통제 체제와 연결되면서 멀티 도메인 오퍼레이션 MDO를 할 수 있는 역량을 가진 국가와 그것을 갖지 못한 국가 간의 또 다른 전력상의 차이를 보여줄 것이다 하는 모습으로 나타납니다. 두 가지만 더 말씀드리면은 이러한 전반적인 것을 고려할 때 사실은 잘 언급되지 않는 것이 각 국가마다 사실은 획득 시스템이 달라요. 그런데 그 획득 시스템, 획득 체계, 액퀴지션 시스템이 뭐가 문제냐? 사실 이것을 빨리 전환시키지 않으면은 옛날 무기를 획득하는 잘못된 방식을 반복할 수가 있습니다. 그것은 무엇이냐? 예를 들어서 우리가 대한민국을 예로 들게요. 뭐 많은 나라가 그럴 겁니다. 획득 절차가 적어도 5년, 7년 이상 걸립니다. 옛날 방식이면은 10년이 넘게 걸려요. 그런데 오늘날의 무기 체계는요, 2, 3년 만에 신무기가 나옵니다. 그렇기 때문에 이 획득 절차를 유연하게 만들어 놓지 못한다면 어떠한 국가는 계속해서 시대에 뒤떨어진 무기 체계만을 구비할 겁니다. 따라서 이 획득 기간을 단축시키고 새로운 무기 체계가 개발됐을 때 그것을 국방에 접목시키는 유연한 시스템을 갖추지 못한다면 여러 도전에 직면할 것이다. 이 부분도 말씀드리고 싶고요. 마지막으로 말씀드리고 싶은 것은 이제 전시와 평시가 구분되기 어려운 상황이다. 뭐 회색지대 도발이나 뭐 회색지대 분쟁이라고 그레이존이라고 많이 이야기하고 있지만 사실은 지금 전쟁은 실질적인 무력 충돌, 우리가 키네틱 파워라고 하잖아요. 키네틱 파워를 사용해서 무력 충돌이 이루어지는 것 외에 보이지 않는 상황에서 사실 그것이 뭐 인지전이라고 표현되기도 하고 또 심리전이라고도 하고 또 뭐 미디어전이라고도 볼 수 있는데 그런 것들로 인해서 사실은 어떤 국가가 adversary, 잠재적 적국과 평시에도 사실은 이러한 운동력을 사용하지 않는 키네틱 파워를 사용하지 않는 그런 분쟁이 지속되는 상황이 많다 그렇게 생각합니다. 이런 것들의 동향을 따라가지 못하면은요 평시에 실제 우리가 전통적으로 이야기하던 전시 준비를 제대로 하지 못하는 그러므로 인해서 실제 키네틱 파워가 동원되는 전쟁에 있어서 이미 패배하고 들어가는 그런 상황이 예상된다. 따라서 이러한 부분에 있어서의 준비가 더 요구되는 것이 이 세션의 주제라고 할 수 있는 새로운 전쟁 양상과 관련해서 제가 말씀드리고 싶은 바입니다. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shin. I mean, from a South Korean perspective, you have some strengths there, perhaps, with South Korea's ability to manufacture military technology and then also risks and threats, to your last point on gray zone activities. Well, if we could throw it next to Professor Tokuchi, I would love to get your perspective on the new faces of war. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me thank the Asan Institute for inviting me to this very important forum, particularly in this year, which is very important for the both countries, Japan and Korea. Thank you very much. Actually, all those three speakers discussed a lot of things related to today's topic, so I'm not so sure whether I'll be able to contribute much more to this topic, but I'll try. around 30 years ago, particularly in the mid-1990s, experts discussed much about information-based RMA. And today, it is being achieved at much, much lower cost. So battlefield awareness, system integration, precision strike, closer cooperation, coordination among soldiers scattered around in a wide battlefield, and also real-time information sharing and quick preparation and quick decision-making, and also unmanned operations. All these things were made possible at much, much lower cost in today's context. And at the same time, attacks do not have to be physically violent. So this information is a typical example. And already, as discussed, dividing lines between war and non-war, between peace and war, and also between uniformed personnel and covert operatives are being blurred. And military means are more effective when combined with non-military means, including political, economic, technological, and information measures. So in that sense, we are in an age of total warfare. And such warfare doesn't end up with war of communication. So we have to be prepared for long war of attrition. So traditional warfare with ground troops, guns, and munitions, just as we see in Ukraine right now. That's the reality. And even the possibility of use of nuclear weapons is not completely excluded. The Sea of Okhotsk, for example. Russian nuclear forces and naval forces remain almost intact. So Russian military operations in the Sea of Okhotsk may be more active to threaten the use of nuclear weapons. So we can't be indifferent to this type of warfare. So it is at the high end of the entire spectrum. And at the same time, we have to be prepared for the much lower end of the spectrum. For example, China's gray zone tactics in many ways. A typical example is a use of China Coast Guard and maritime militia, so-called Little Blue Men at sea, particularly in the South China Sea, but not limited to the South China Sea. So China will continue to test the red lines with such small-scale moves. And not only weak countries, but also political entities which are not broadly recognized as sovereign nations are vulnerable. I'm sure that you understand which entity in our neighborhood I'm talking about. And we must be prepared to the entire spectrum of warfare, from high end to low end. But today's hybrid warfare is worthy of larger attention. And in a sense, it is not new. But today's world is much different from old days. So there are at least 5 points in today's context. Of course, first of all, we have to be mindful of the much destructive power of military forces. And so in that sense, blatant use of military power is becoming more difficult than previous time. Of course, we can't exclude the use of blatant military force. Actually, we are now witnessing it, but still, I can say that the use of blatant military force is becoming more difficult than before. And secondly, the power of international law against use of force. There is no absolute power of law to prevent or stop wars in this decentralized world. But combined with the first point, with the more destructive power of military forces, international law raises the hurdle of political decision to the use of force. And thirdly, a development of interdependence of states. I don't think I need much more explanation about that. And the fourth, as already discussed much, technology development, particularly information technology and development which is going on, particularly in cyberspace. And in addition, mass production of easy-to-operate equipment at much lower cost became possible. The typical example is, of course, the drone. And finally, sharing of the spirit of respect for human rights. Some may argue for the respect of, from the humanitarian perspective, but others may argue for it as human resources are dwindling in countries with a declining birth rate. Japan is so, South Korea is so, and probably North Korea as well. Armed conflicts with large human casualties will create a big risk for any political leaders. And all these factors contributed to the development of hybrid warfare, particularly weaponization of non-kinetic means. So we have to be prepared from these wide spectrum of warfare at the same time.
Okay, and Professor Wang, thank you for being so patient, sitting there on the end and waiting for your turn to speak. I know that we have been discussing the new faces of war, but you actually had something in mind about something perhaps unexpected. Please, the floor is yours.
It's really my great honor to be here. Just now, our panelists talk about different types of the war. I really want to share with us, with everybody, about the unexpected war in Northeast Asia region. Actually, I mean, the possibility of the intentional war in this area is very low because of no any country, including North Korea, want the war happening. But I think there are some very, very dangerous scenarios very close to unexpected wars. Maybe the first scenario is very intensive situation between two Koreas. As we know, South Korea has cut off all the channels with South Korea. At the same time, we can see the joint military drill frequently conducted by South Korea, US, further fueled this kind of scenario. Maybe second, I think most dangerous scenario is the spillover from the war of another region. People always talk about maybe the war even happened in Taiwan region, maybe spill over to Korea Peninsula. In this kind of scenario, maybe U.S. war plane will take off from the military base over here. China will retaliate. Then North Korea may treat this as a very wonderful, very good opportunity to attack South Korea. Maybe the third very dangerous scenario is a domestic crisis. Many professors, observers worry about that maybe North Korea domestic crisis will happen. They may transfer, they may maybe shift this kind of crisis through, launching a war with South Korea. What we have seen in recent days, since the martial law declaration, recent days from here, maybe this kind of possibility cannot rule out from here. Then how to prevent this kind of, what I call unexpected wars from happening in this area? I think first, communication. Communication is most important. Yeah, just like I mentioned earlier, although two Koreas has cut off all the channels to communicate, but I think we also continue to promote the dialogue, maybe from the start of the civil dialogue, such as health and export, sports exchange, little by little, step by step. I think we can create the conditions for the governments of two Koreas to have a direct dialogue. Also, we can see when Trump took office, he expressed several times he want to engage the supreme leader of North Korea again. I think it's a very positive signal. We should encourage it. As for, the Taiwan issue, I think all the regional countries, we should discourage the provocative activities, maybe by Taiwan separatists. Peaceful reunification is the mainline policy toward the Taiwan issue. Maybe the only possible I can imagine the war happening across Taiwan Strait is maybe independence declaration and maybe another country to assist Taiwan militarily. So I think every country in this region, we should have mainland and Taiwan have more dialogue. Maybe another one, maybe the last, I think we should do is we really should consider the proposal, so-called double suspension. So many years, the history tells us showing muscle, showing strong signal cannot resolve any problem in this region, only make the situation more dangerous. So I think it's really the time for us to change the mindset. Yeah, for North Korea and for here, in South Korea, even US, I think we really reconsider to change our mindset. We really, through developing so many, strategic weapons, we can get more security. I think it's a bigger question mark. So I think the double suspension, maybe we should encourage, we should give the pressure for North Korea to stop their strategic weapons development. At the same time, I think the joint military drill, maybe by South Korea, by US, maybe we can reconsider. Maybe why not we cannot, stop it. Even maybe a short period. Maybe try to do it. Maybe by doing this, we also can create the conditions for the dialogue. So I think it's very, very important. Maybe it's time for us to consider. I will stop here. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've made a lot of great points here. I wonder if any of the panelists have any remarks or questions to other panelists at this point. If not, then I'm going to ask the same question to all of you about readiness. We're talking about the new phases of war, modern war, and I'm actually going to do this in reverse order. So I'm going to start with Professor Wang, and again, I'm going to ask the same question to all of the panelists. You mentioned that in an ideal scenario, we have these peaceful resolutions to the two Koreas, to Taiwan Strait. But the question I have is, how ready is your country, the country you're from, for a modern war? If, say, peace is not a scenario, we are looking at potential military conflict. We're talking about all the permutations of how wars changed. It's longer, the sort of political, diplomatic tent poles, as Dr. Falkenrath has said, might not be there. I guess how prepared do you see China for any type of modern warfare?
I think for China's policy toward the Korean Peninsula is very consistent. Denuclearization and resolve the problems through the dialogue. I think since the end of the Cold War, China's policy toward the Korean Peninsula has not changed at all. So we always encourage the two Koreas and the Korea and the United States have more dialogue. But as you know, in the past several years, especially in the recent maybe 3 years in your previous governments, I really think the consultation and the cooperation between, not only between China and the US is very less than we needed. Even the cooperation, even the consultation between China and South Korea, it's less than the needed. Yeah, we can see maybe in the past several years, even the special envoy for Korea Peninsula, China and South Korea, we according my understanding, maybe never visited with each other's capital. We even didn't talk about this issue maybe in the past several years. So I think for China, it's a really very, very dilemma, the situation. On the one part, the current situation, definitely China do not want to see. As we mentioned earlier, the trilateral cooperation among US, South Korea, and Japan. On the other side, the very close cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Even some rumors, maybe some military cooperation. For China, the Cold War structure in this area, China definitely want to not to see it happen again. But what China maybe to do is very, very limited. We just maybe to push, to encourage every party in this area to have more dialogue, show positive signals. But China, in many, many problems, such as nuclear issue, maybe we need the direct cooperation, even the dialogue between two Koreas, between US and North Korea. But you are not willing to have more dialogue. So my final word is, China's policy toward the Korean Peninsula, I think, is a very consistent. Is in the interest of every country of this region. But I think China's influence is quite limited. Yeah.
Sorry, just one quick follow-up to that. What should Beijing do to get the two Koreas to talk?
Yeah, I think maybe behind the surface, maybe China always encourage two Koreas have more dialogue. So I think maybe after the election in here, no matter which party wins the election, I think China will continue to encourage you have more dialogue with North Korea. Even the humanitarian aid exchange. At the same time, although in very recent years after the pandemic, we can see the exchange between China and North Korea is not so much as the North Korea with Russia. But I think we will also use every effort to encourage North Korea have more dialogue with South Korea. Yeah, I'm sure it's in your interest, with the two North Korea and South Korea side. Yeah.
All right. President Tokuchi, if I could ask you, how prepared do you think Japan is for a modern war?
Oh, yes. There are several points. First of all, all of government approach. Because today's warfare is a total warfare, not only military, but also, all instruments of national power is utilized. So therefore, diplomatic power, military power, economic power, technology power, and information power. These power and capabilities all must be, mastered in order to generate big power. That's one point. And secondly, intelligence capability must be very strengthened. Particularly, it is important for hybrid warfare. Each of hybrid threats may be very small, but accumulation of small threats make a huge threat in the long run. Well, not necessarily long run, probably in a few months or a few days or a few hours, suddenly. So therefore, enhancement of intelligence capability and also intelligence sharing, that's very, very important. Also in that context, international partnership is important, not only for information sharing, but in order to collectively create a resilience to decrease vulnerability. Yeah, I think those 3 points are important. And may I add one point? Of course, as our Chinese colleague said, diplomacy and dialogue, that's very, very important. But, for example, suppose country A and country B, and they are in a very difficult situation, I mean, suspicious with each other, then I strongly wonder whether country A, for example, can reasonably expect that if country A is nice to B, B will be nice to A. I do not think those kind of things can happen. For example, the relationship between the Philippines and China and Taiwan and China, So I think, of course, I strongly support for the, power of and importance of dialogue. But before that, if there is a strong suspicion between the two countries, two entities, then dialogue may not necessarily work. So we have to address that issue too.
Yeah, we've seen Japan recently deploy medium-range missiles, first time in a long time. So point well taken. Dr. Shin, if I could ask you, South Korea, how ready or not is South Korea for a modern war?
Oh yeah, we are ready. I think the South Korea faces tremendous threat from the north, so we spend at least 2.5% of our GDP to defense. We focuses on military revolution, and we enhance the technology to use the military affairs. And we're training the manpower to adjust to that kind of a new trend of high-tech operative military operation. So that's all we're preparing. So I don't have any doubt South Korea is catching up with the current phases of a war. But the problem is, it's not a matter of that kind of a technological problem. The strategic balance we face here in the Korean Peninsula, that's the huge things, because North Korea has nuclear weapon, and North Korea actually threatening to use its nuclear weapon to South Korea. Kim Jong-un announced that the two-Korea relation is not the formal relation. We do not recognize each other as a country. We recognize each other kind of interim process heading toward the unification, peaceful unification. But Kim Jong-un announced that is not now. They recognize South Korea, which is a hostile country, separate country, and North Korea can use its nuclear weapon at any time he wants. That kind of a strategic imbalance we face but that's not we can do with our high-tech AI. Even AI cannot solve that kind of problem. So I think the strategic balance, whether we adapted the U.S. extended deterrence, whether we request the redeployment of a tactical nuclear weapon or nuclear sharing. So even some people argue that we need our own nuclear weapon, but that is an ongoing debate here in Korean Peninsula, but that is a top issue. With regard to new phases of warfare, when you compare to our capability against North Korea, I think South Korea is upper hand, superior than North Korea. In addition, if you permit, I'd like to ask 3 questions to my friend of China, because he mentioned unexpectedly South Korea's situation.
Please.
Yeah. I think that China always mentioned the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and the peaceful dialogue, but I think the priorities slightly changed recently. It's not the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula at this moment. Probably your top priority is a peaceful discussion first, and then denuclearization might be second. That's my first question. Second one is your stop 쌍중단. I don't know what is the exact term. You're stopping. The North Korea stopped its nuclear development, and South Korea stopped joint military drill with the United States. I think that in some cases makes sense, but without the total roadmap, denuclearization roadmap of North Korea, you are stopping is actually hurt South Korea's security because we cannot do our defensive measure against North Korea threat while North Korea holds its nuclear weapon without any problem. So how can we deal with that kind of gap caused by your dual topic? That's my second question. Third question is, I respect your comments. We need communication. President Trump's engagement policy might be a good one. I totally agree. But your comment with regard to Taiwan case, if U.S. forces in Korea might engage in the Taiwan Strait, South Korea might be a target of Chinese military attack. You know, that kind of comment, in my sense, it's another kind of psychological warfare. When we call the gray zone, that kind of comment might be regarded by South Korean as a kind of psychological warfare. So I think I ask my Chinese friends with regard to that kind of comments, please be careful. You know, this day, China argued that it established some kind of metal structure in the PMG, which is agreed between the South Korea and China. So those area only focuses on the fishery, but you made a new structure. Although you mentioned that kind of a fishery purpose, but actually it is not agreed. So it raises another concern that there might be another kind of Chinese gray zone operation. So I think that I love China, as you know. You're my good friend. But those voices from China might raise misunderstanding here in Korean Peninsula. You know, it hurt South Korea's those people who working for the better relation between Korea and China. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Dr. Shin. I think there were some questions in there, and Professor Wang, if you could give a response.
Okay, Mr. Shin is my very good friend. But this question I think is very hard to answer. Yeah, I try to give my viewpoints. For the first question, the priority, I do not think there are fundamental change for China's policy toward Korean Peninsula. Maybe denuclearization and the stability is two sides of one coin. From Chinese side, maybe these two targets, these two goals, we should choose it maybe at the same time. Maybe the recent years, we can see China's foreign ministry didn't publicly announce such kind of denuclearization. Maybe so much time as the before. I think only one reason is because maybe the most urgent issue in this region is stability. Yeah, we can see very clearly recent years. Maybe the last October, even the war is very close to break out. So maybe this is my viewpoint. Maybe there are no change. Just maybe the more urgent issue is to maintain stability in this area. Maybe the second, I totally agree with you. Actually, the joint military drill among you with another countries, I think is your sovereignty rights. Is to, maintain to protect your country. But at the same time, we can see, in this area, we always talk about which one is legal, which one is illegal. We always talk about, okay, North Korea developing nuclear activities is illegal. But I think when we talk about legal or illegal, maybe the more important thing is how to prevent the war from happening. We can see, maybe in the past several years, the vicious circle in this region continue again and again. since the Cold War, end of the Cold War, North Korea developed more strategic weapons, the more large-scale military drill in here. I think only make the situation dangerous. So I think I totally agree with you. This is your legal rights. North Korea develop their nuclear activities restricted by UN resolution. But I think a more important thing is we should prevent the war, unexpected wars from happening in this area. What we can see from the very, very recent years, North Korea's strategic weapons, including their SBM, I think totally out of control. I think we should think out some ideas to manage this kind of scenario. As for the last question, I will speak it very, very quickly. The war in Taiwan, my logic is, this is my idea. I saw this kind of logic from maybe South Korea, from United States. Some scholars really worry about if the war happened in Taiwan, maybe this can, spill over Korea Peninsula. Maybe the logic is maybe just like I mentioned earlier, maybe the warplane US will take off from here. After that scenario, if war happened between China and the United States because of Taiwan, China definitely will retaliate. Then maybe after that kind of scenario, because of miscalculation, maybe North Korea will feel this is an opportunity. So I do not think that it will happen. It will happen. Because just like I mentioned earlier, China definitely do not want to see any war happen in Taiwan region. But I think we should prevent such a kind of scenario from happening. I think miscalculation maybe is only one. If we cannot call it the biggest reason, I think we should have more dialogue. Yeah.
Okay, I know there are probably many follow-up questions we could have to your remarks, but thank you for prompting the question, Dr. Shin, and thank you for answering Professor Wang. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Falkenrath for waiting very patiently here. I guess maybe if I modify the question about whether the U.S. is ready or not for modern warfare, one of the points you raised was how long these modern wars are, how long they take, their time period. I guess, are you seeing a shift in the U.S. in terms of, if we think about the potential conflicts 5-10 years down the line, if not sooner, do you feel like the U.S. is adapting in their military planning and their sort of strategizing to everything you outlined in your opening remarks?
It's a mixed picture because the United States has got global responsibilities and has to think about and prepare for many different kinds of contingencies and moves slowly. We're talking about an enormous apparatus here. I mean, the U.S. defense budget plus the intelligence budget plus the nuclear weapons budget is close to $1 trillion per year, so 5% of GNP. It's huge. And it moves slowly to different things. And so it does reasonably well for two situations. One is when it gets to decide the time and place of the strike. It can prepare and get ready and is got pretty unique capabilities in that way. And then the second is for the known contingencies, like the Korean Peninsula or the Taiwan Straits, for the first move or two of the predictable, straightforward scenario, there's lots and lots of plans and preparations and thinking around that. The area where it gets harder is the unpredictable and the kind of hybrid tactics that might be taken. So unpredictable in terms of what theater it happens or how exactly it would happen. So a Chinese, these are crazy scenarios, but an amphibious assault on Taiwan is better understood and better characterized than a blockade, because a blockade is a hybrid tactic that combines diplomacy and politics and global trade and economics and all sorts of things, whereas a straightforward attack is something the U.S. military kind of understands and can deal with and has been preparing for a long time. So those are the ways I'd put it, is the readiness picture is uneven and is focused on the first steps in a conflict, not the latter steps. There's a National Commission on Defense that just completed a study about a year ago, and it finds the United States defense establishment massively deficient to fulfill its global responsibilities, which is probably true in some narrow sense, but also speaks to the impossibility of truly being fully ready for every possible scenario to be dealt with in a dominant way with very low risk of failure. That's just not in the cards when you're already spending 5% of GNP on defense and you have a budget deficit equal to 6% of GNP. So there's just no way the United States could be ready for everything through the full range of conflict.
Dr. Falkenrath, if I could ask one quick follow-up to that. If there was one priority area for the U.S. that you would say, look, we know we got a lot of things we need to work on. Here's the one thing we should suck more resources into. What would you recommend?
Well, unfortunately, it's not a military thing. I mean, it's a political thing. And I'm firmly in the camp that the investment in alliances is among the wisest strategic things that the United States can be doing. Unfortunately, the current administration is moving in a different direction, much more towards sphere of influences. But I believe that you cannot be a global power without global alliance structures. And investing in those and keeping those alive and vibrant is the most important thing, more than any particular technology or capability. The idea that the United States can be a superpower alone is preposterous. Like, it's not possible. So it takes friends and allies and institutions, and those are the most important things.
Thank you. And especially thank you to you for patience as we came back around. I guess, obviously, Israel is currently in a conflict now, but to the extent, are people even in Israel thinking about potential conflicts in the future and how the country might position itself differently than it did, say, before October 7th, to some of the opening remarks you made?
Yeah, I want to refer to the actual imminent threat on the existing of the state of Israel, which in a way resembles what's happening here in South Korea and North Korea. And the threat is Iran. And the threat is nuclear capacity of Iran. They are just that close in reaching the threshold of being a nuclear state. And that is the most important issue that Israel has to deal with in the future, in the near future, and later on. Now, I want to refer to what Richard had said here, and I absolutely agree with him. The way to perceive and to deter this thing is by alliances. Israel cannot do it by themselves, and in fact, Iran poses a threat to the whole world. Well, I'm not talking about just Israel, we are talking about the jihadic movement that is behind it, and so the way to deal with this future war is by deterrence, alliances, and intelligence. Those three things are linked and combined together in order to try to eliminate these future threats and to try to deal with them in the most appropriate way. And I'm not just talking about military. I'm talking about diplomacy. I'm talking about economic. I'm talking about all the spectrum that we have to face in order to eliminate the modern war, the new war that is so easily can be conducted with all these technological apparatus that we see. So the major threat, as I said before, is the nuclear threat, which is exactly the same for here and for Israel. And I think the methods that should be applied are the same methods, so we have a lot in common about that.
If I could ask you just one quick follow-up. You mentioned that you feel that the conflict in Gaza is the world's first digital war, I believe, as you said. If we just look at the sort of state of play today versus October 7th. How have you seen, what evolutions have you seen? What's sort of most different in this sort of digital warfare today than it was 18 months ago, 17, 18 months ago when it started?
I think we can talk about it, I think, for hours, but I think the most significant thing is the precision. It's the capability of minimizing civilian casualties by using all sorts of methods, but it's also danger if we give an AI the decision instead of human decision. This we come to a place which is problematic, and of course the ability of cost effectiveness of the war, because of the precision, because of the quick response that we can initiate. This changes completely the economic of the future war.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to, well, Dr. Shin already took up this offer, but if any panelists have any remarks or questions to the second round of comments, I just want to open. Okay. Well, we have just 5 minutes left here. I think we have time for perhaps one audience question or two audience questions, if there are any at this moment. We have mics here on the side. Okay, a little bit of a, oh, we have one here. All right, thank you.
Yes. Hi, yes, Yusukado. Thank you. Very quickly, we're talking about modern warfare, and North Korea is learning in Ukraine, and drone wars and all that. So once again, how do you evaluate how the North Koreans will, integrate that into the war doctrine, and how South Korea feels about it? Thank you. And if Israel, if you have any information about drone technology getting into North Korean army, that would be helpful. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Shin, do you want to?
Me?
Well, I guess,
Okay.
did you have someone in, specifically you were addressing the first?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I do not have a specific information or intelligence with regard to North Korean military activity in Ukraine, but reportedly they got some economic support from Russia and military technology from Russia, but that eventually enhanced the military capability of North Korea, not only for the strategic matter, nuclear matter, but also for the conventional matters. But more concern I have is the North Korea's experience on modern warfare. That's a big thing. Probably the last war North Korea participated is secret participation of secret support on the Vietnam War, probably. After that, it's more than almost 50 years. They don't have no experience of modern warfare, but they learned modern warfare at Ukraine. They learned and they experienced the drone war, which South Korean military have no experience. That is kind of a concern for me. In addition, we have here, we have a foster general, retired foster general. He is the vice commander at the CFC. So I ask you to make some comment of him. He's in front of him, General An. So if you agree, he can make some comments.
Well, maybe we don't need to reach into the audience for commentary. We only have a few minutes left anyways, and you're welcome, General An. Mr. Ailam, excuse me, let me slightly broaden the question that was asked. I think she was wondering if there was any Iranian influence on North Korean drones, perhaps, but just have you mentioned Iran in your comments of what that's a threat to your country, but then also here on the Korean Peninsula. So I guess, do you have any thoughts on drones, collaboration between Tehran and Pyongyang, and just more broadly, what is concerning to you about North Korea-Iranian collaboration of late?
I'm absolutely sure there is a collaboration between North Korea and Iran on drones, on ballistic missiles, and of course on nuclear capacity. We know that from intelligence sources that it actually exists. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of the Iranian drones and some of the Iranian apparatus within North Korea. I would definitely think it's reasonable. It is worthwhile in looking into that matter. And I think on the intelligence level, South Korea must have precise intelligence and know-how in order to face this phenomena, which can be very, very hazardous. We have seen it in Ukraine. We have seen it also in Israel, while Israel had, of course, were prepared by all sorts of layers of Iron Dome shields and stuff like that. It definitely poses a threat, and I would just mention that until this moment, we don't have an actual defense robust and rigid against drones. It's going to happen pretty soon with the laser application, but currently we do not have it, and I think South Korea who's definitely looking into this matter.
All right. Well, I want to thank all the panelists here today. Why don't we give them a round of applause for a fun discussion today? All right, thank you, everyone. And thank you for attending the session.
Thank you. Good job.